My name's Daniel McCaffrey, and this is a series on the productive economy and where it sits within our society and our political framework. We're part of a discussion now on the harm that can be done to the central engine of our prosperity by the ideas in the political parties. The political parties put forward the ideas to the electorate assigns the votes in their choice, and a government is formed which takes charge of the state. And how the political party thinks has a deep effect on how the state treats the political economy. To understand the Labour Party's view of the political economy, you have to go back to its foundation and its history and trace that history and its thinking through to the present time.
The Labour Party was founded in 1916. This diagram shows the composition of the Labour Party at that time. A trade union party, and it was a trade union party because of the reaction of the trade unions to the thorough defeat in 1913 in the Wellington waterfront strike and in the Waihi gold mine strike. What had happened is two things had changed. The Arbitration Act brought in by the Liberals had started to break down when a more aggressive red-fed set of unions, imbued with a bit of wobbly philosophy, Worldwide Union of Socialists, had stepped up to the plate and demanded more rights, better conditions, and found they weren't getting them under the Arbitration Act. On the other side of the fence, the employers were a lot more militant, feeling that they had the power in the Arbitration Act, which simply forbade strikes and lockouts, and that disputes had to be settled by arbitration. But what changed dramatically in 1912 was the election of William Massey, who was prepared to throw the state in behind, and he very much did this by armed force. So by 1916, after the worst social unrest in New Zealand's history, the Labour Party came together and founded a political course of action. If they couldn't get better terms and conditions for working people, and the state was frustrating them in that ambition, sensibly, it was therefore obvious to take over the power of the state to seek control of the means of production, distribution and exchange in the hands of the state, run by the trade union party, the Labour Party. Well, we've jumped forward over 50 years, and an enormous number of things have happened to New Zealand, its economy and the political scene in that time. Labour has come to office triumphantly in 1935, and the actual people defeated as union officials in the Waihi strike and the Wellington waterfront strike are now sitting in office in the cabinet. Walter Nash negotiates his way through the financial crisis of 1938, and as a result of events just happened, the Great Depression, Labour has moved into social welfare, to a concern for people's housing, people's incomes and their ability to live in the society, and started a program of state housing and better compensation for those unable to work. And this progress is true and is still sustained by the Sid Holland government of the 1950s. And Wally Nash, as Prime Minister of New Zealand, sustains the trade union control of the party and the views that the party is there to see that the members of the union and the working class are getting their just rewards. And we've come forward now to 1972, when Norman Kirk takes office after a very long period of government by Keith Holyoake, and the party as much as it was. The people sitting in the cabinet are still people who have worked on the dams in the Waikato, in the mines. They're actual union officials who have actually worked, become a walking delegate, become a site delegate, become a regional delegate, offered a position as an official in the union, and are then selected as members of Parliament. But there's a new element come in, people such as myself who come in on issues. We're interested in a nuclear-free Pacific, and that component of the branch members, since the party now has a significant number of MPs, the branch members are in behind the members of Parliament as their support to gain votes and campaigning it. So the party is changing. And Kirk, of course, has to react to the oil crisis of 1973. Government is thrown out of office in 1975. But the party is essentially still the same, controlled by the trade unions, for the trade unions. Well, we've leaped forward into the middle of the Longy government. And in 1986, the composition of the party has changed dramatically. I myself set out in 1975, said that the cause of the defeat by Muldoon was simply a lack of membership. There was about 14,000 members in the party, and by 1983 we had got it up to 44,000. But that had an effect that no one anticipated, of course, and that for the first time in the history of the Labour Party, the branch members outvoted the trade union members at a Labour Party conference in Auckland. And furthermore, the things that were happening in the country, this change of balance of power in the party was having an effect, to say the least of it. What had happened, of course, was that the government had taken office, and it's always assumed that when a government takes office, there's a clean slate. You can go and implement all the wonderful ideological beliefs and values and hopes that you'd entertained when next you took office. But what had happened was that Muldoon, New Zealand's only real true socialist, had taken an iron grip on the productive economy of the country and wrecked it. And so what the government did in 1984 was a simple, pragmatic response to the disaster that faced it, which was rather large. There was 71 million subsidised sheep in the country, munching through taxpayers' dollars. The farmers were effectively on welfare. The sheep meat was unsaleable. It was piling up and being made into fish meal in parts of the country. Those sheep numbers had to be reduced back to what the market would buy, and that involved taking off the subsidies, which would be a lot of pain for farmers, but a hell of a lot more pain for the supporters of the Labour Party who works in freezing works and who had come to depend for their livelihood on this subsidy from the government to the farmers. The second problem, of course, was 18% interest rates. And the approach to that was strictly monetarist, to allow interest rates to rise and constrict the money supply. Muldoon piled money out of the Treasury for all sorts of wonderful, ambitious things, and of course lost about $8 billion on a gamble that think big was the answer to the oil prices. It wasn't. The other problem was that the current deficit, our trading account, was in a disastrous state and wasn't being helped by a dramatically overvalued dollar. So that had to be dealt with. The other thing was that the government's surplus, balance of accounts in the books, was in a disastrous form. Interest payments on the debts owed by the New Zealand government consumed 20% of the budget for no great purpose. There was nothing to show for it. That wasn't a very good outcome. Another thing that had to be tackled was the fact that the state trading institutions over 50 years had built up massive numbers of employees who were all very busy but not contributing any value to the enterprise, and they were making colossal losses. Forest Department had planted forests everywhere on the basis that that's what you did if you're a forestry department run by the government. No idea how to harvest them, no idea when to harvest them, no idea what roads would be needed, and no idea what price they might ever reach in the market, because they weren't a market trading enterprise. Other vast realms of the government trading departments plundered on, simply asking Treasury for more money every time they needed more money. The net result, though, with the change of balance of power in the party, was when the party lost office in 1990, having implemented a number of deeply unpopular things, both with the trade union membership, although the government had preserved all the welfare provisions, and it had preserved the position of the trade unions, compulsory unionism, and all the benefits that entitled. But 1990 came, and it all changed. Which brings us, of course, to what the Labour Party looks today as the sixth Labour government takes office in 2017. It's quite a different world entirely. That balance that once existed between the branch members in 1987 and the trade union affiliate members is all gone. There's been a dramatic purge of the membership. Some parties have been shown the door. The new Labour Party has morphed into the Alliance, and the left wing of the Labour Party, we call the Alliance that, is out in the cold until it's part of a Helen Clark government. The party no longer looks as, the vanguard of the working class. It has taken on the politics of identity, which is fed through as a meme from the late 1960s. You are not an individual, you're part of a group, and we will deal with the representatives of that group and treat that group as a voting bloc. So there's Pacific Island representatives on the council, there's Maori representatives, Rainbow Group representatives, all on the Labour Council. The branches are represented by about 6 regional representatives, but the branches have been totally purged with the removal of Peter Dunn's party, the, if you like, wishy-washy semi-socialists, the ACT party, the party of... And even Clive Matthewson and his like has been sent out into the cold. And the membership that is left in the branches are as ideologically pure as they possibly could be. The trade unions have one representative on the Labour Party Council now instead of complete control as they had for decades, eons. And that trade union representation is not what it once was, because if you look at the ministers who took office in the Clark government, they'd never spent years digging coal or driving trucks or serving pints in the pub. They'd gone to university, become academics, and then entered as officials of the trade union, and from there to the party's cabinet room. And the cabinet room is no longer recruited from that lower trade union affiliated group, but rather is people who represent groups or who in general are part of the academic elite. Because what happened in 1980, 81, 82, 83, 84 was a whole swathe of people come into the party, and it was pretty obviously that it would win the elections at some stage from Muldoon, and their pet hobby horses could be peddled and ridden to their satisfactory conclusion. The difficulty was that the ordinary branch member, a bus driver from Mount Roskill, found themselves being lectured endlessly by academic-type persons with very broad and ideological points of view. The most dangerous people in politics are academics and teachers. They spend all their life coming into places where everyone in that room has less knowledge than they have. They're not necessarily smarter, they don't necessarily have better ideas, but they can fling knowledge around in the manner of Geoffrey Palmer and build ideological sandcastles in the air to an extent that, as I said, the ordinary bus driving member from Mount Roskill simply isn't interested in. He's interested in his wage, possibility of a house, balance of a mortgage, and an education for his children. So that's the party of the Labour Party in 2017. Its voting pool is out there among the those who are on welfare and those who are going to vote for the party for what they can get out of it. Of course, there are those who say that the decline in trade union membership and as a component of the Labour Party and those in the productive sector is because of the removal of compulsory unionism. Well, that isn't so. In the productive economy, called the private sector, union membership is only 12%. And in the public sector, it's 60%. That's an enormous and dramatic change. And why did that happen? Well, here's the reason. Because the entire economy had changed. The productive sector had evolved. It had grown out to reach out for opportunity, for advancement, for increased prosperity, and for better wages in most cases. And so the people in the productive economy who worked in it didn't see that the trade unions had anything to offer. They rightly seen that their success rested on the success of the enterprise. If the factory went broke, they were going to be out on the street, or wages would stay static or decline, and so the success of the enterprise determined their success. And the employers, to a greater degree one hopes, seen that the success and the training and the advancement and the skills of their employees and their contribution to value added was a component of their success. And both of these parties knew that their entire success of the whole enterprise depended on the customers. And so this evolved, complex web of relationships and opportunities, of wealth creation, value added, supplied all the taxes to the government, who, in the form of parties, handed it out for the purposes of buying votes or advancing the party's opportunity. And that is how the productive economy actually is. But given, as I've explained, the new component and framework of the Labour Party and its evolution from the representatives of part of the productive economy into the now identity-driven party, they are able to stand aside and take an ideological and academic view of the productive economy, and this is what they see. As far as the Labour Party is concerned, this great organism of the productive economy is composed of a whole lot of employees being exploited by the employers. And furthermore, that this whole productive enterprise is simply trashing the environment to get a few dollars out of it for the personal wealth of the people who own it. Of course, we know that isn't true, but if you believe that your future and the future of the country is dependent on beliefs such as that climate change is the greatest challenge of our era, we'll talk about that later, or that gender equity is the most important thing there ever was, or that we should be building light rail white elephants to airports that don't work anywhere else in the world, and you extract a few $1 billion out of the productive economy to affect that belief, well, who's to worry? And there's no one inside their party rooms anymore to remind them what your actual workers do and what their interests are. And there's no one inside the party rooms, there's no one in the cabinet, there's no one anywhere to tell them a bit of instruction on how the productive economy actually creates the wealth, creates the taxes, creates the wages, and satisfies the needs of the entire population of New Zealand. So it's going to be very interesting, isn't it?
So there you are. Parties come into power with ideas forged with their experience in the past and project that idea, those ideas and ideology into the future. The new 6th Labour government, led by Jacinda Ardern, has stated quite explicitly that capitalism is not the road to go. Well, capitalism is a name long applied to the productive economy. It's quite the wrong name, of course. As I hope I explained, capitalism is a component of the productive economy, along with ownership, along with the work of the people in it, and most importantly, the customers who determine what everyone does by what they decide to buy. So the prognosis is not good for the productive economy. Labour is more than indifferent to it and sees it as a repository of funds to cure poverty, put people into permanent poverty and buy votes.